Okay, well, thanks for agreeing to meet with me today and talk about some things that are going on in the occult and general world of the things that we like to do and spend our time on.
Yes, my pleasure.
So I was thinking today we could talk about a couple things, primarily the risks and benefits of incorporating modern magic, and specifically some of the things you said the other day about Thelema into your practice, because over the last couple of years I've had to adapt my grimoire-only approach and start incorporating some of the things that I had discounted that had been post 1899, and I thought it was really cool not to give any credit to any of the magicians since then for a long time. And then I ended up joining the OTO and had to start practicing these lesser rituals with a pentagram and stuff. So yeah, just I wanted to talk a little bit about how you incorporated Pyramidos and some of the suggestions you made about Libra O and Libra E, and understanding how rituals are formulaic from that perspective. And then after we talked that, I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about the occult revival and where it's been and where it's at and sort of what happens next, if that sounds cool.
A good little itinerary.
Yeah, I figure we'll get through as much as we can, and if we get tired of talking, we'll stop.
Yeah, fair enough.
Alrighty.
Now, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I hear you fine.
I've got it hands-free at the moment.
Yeah,
My own dubious. But
yeah, you're coming
hey,
through pretty clear.
that's good, that's good. So, I mean, the Libra E, Libra O stuff, I mean, that's really about training, because, you know, we haven't really got much of a clue how the old grimoire is trained, except as, like, Roman Catholic priests or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily recommend pentagram rituals and so on for grimoire practice, but as I said at the time, you can always adjust later. You know, get the training first and then adapt it to what you're actually trying to do. In this case, grimoire magic.
Right? Are you talking
Pyramidos, I directly involved with my grimoire magic. Yeah.
Okay, so are you talking about from like Libra O and Libra E and the inclusion of 777? Are you talking about just...
Yeah, that I consider valuable training. I don't consider it necessarily compatible with grimoire magic, but it will help you develop the psychic muscles or whatever to perform grimoire magic or whatever at some point in the future.
So are you talking about the meditational practices like sitting in asana and visualizations and that kind of thing?
Yeah.
Or are you talking about or all of it, the diaries and understanding your limits and
Well,
dharana?
yeah, all of it. And I've worked a major slice of the AA curriculum between 1976 and getting towards the turn of this century.
Mm-hmm.
And that definitely helped me in getting to grips with the grimoires again on a better footing than I had when I was a teenager.
So what was better? What was it that you learned?
For a start, psychic resilience, when spirits start walking through the wall and all the rest of it. You need to be able to control your emotional responses, your breathing, stuff like that, just in order to carry on. And I think magical training, proper magical training, it should put you in that position.
So it's not just it's not like the astral muscles or whatever, but it's also the ability to control your breath, for example, and not freak out when the spirits actually show up.
Not freaking out is a pretty important one, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the IoT's old curriculum, Liber Null, etc., is also very valuable stuff. Even though Pete Carroll's not exactly grimoire friendly himself, the manual is very useful training.
Right. So is it the training of doing the rituals, doing the exercises, and then writing it down? Is it that whole complete set, or
well,
more than that?
Hard for me to say, in a way that's going to be appropriate to every single individual.
Oh, right.
But yeah, people do say, well, how did you prepare for all this stuff? And yeah, it was through years of work. Lots of bornness rites, as I referred to them then, and that's what put me in a position to sort of conjure demons without falling over in a faint when it worked.
Yeah, I had some people ask me the other day about, what do I need to do before I start doing demon conjure? And my response is just conjure demons, see how that goes. Deal with.
Well, that is pretty much how I started as well. I mean, my grimoire work has come in two phases. I mean, there was my early life, teens and early 20s, and then getting back into it in a big way at about the turn of the 21st century. Turn to my true love, so to speak, but on a higher arc, because in the meantime I was much better trained. My critical faculties were also better trained. That's another thing about the AA training. It does teach you to, how to be about critical thinking, and are there other explanations for this phenomenon? Does it matter? And so on.
Right. So
there aren't many training systems around, but at the end of the day, right? Pete Carroll's is a good one. Crowley's is certainly a good one. Franz Barden's by repute. I mean, I've known good magicians who cut their teeth on that. But it's not my experience.
Right. Yeah. Me neither.
After that, you start to run out of suggestions if you're sticking within modern Western terms.
Right.
And I'm not recommend that someone goes off and becomes a Roman Catholic cleric, because I don't think it's essential or even necessarily useful.
Yeah. Yeah, see, I don't even know what I could recommend that people practice with that had any effect on me, because I've done so many things, over the last 30 years or so. I did chaos magic. I've done the AA stuff. I've recently gotten ordained as a priest in a wandering bishop's lineage, whatever. It was supposed to go back to Christ, or at least Peter, and I'm like, I don't know what it is that I bring to the magical circle today when I do a goetic conjuration, or, using the term loosely. I don't know what influences are going to all have been the contributing factor for my experiences, but I do know that today when I do a grimoire ritual, it's better than ever, and it's after 2 years of having done the AA curriculum myself, and going through these OTO initiations and going through this ordination, I can't objectively say, you, sir, are going to have a great experience conjuring demons, and that person isn't, because they haven't done the work. I don't know what work I've done that makes it make sense now,
No, me either. I mean, there has been a lot of work, and any part of it could have been useful or superfluous. But certainly having done some training is useful. Rather than just jumping in the deep end. And critical faculties is an important part of it.
Are there any dangers in going into it? Like you said, you incorporated Pyramidos into your goetic practice. Before we go any further, what does that actually look like?
Opening by Pyramidos.
No, I mean, where does it fall in the grimoire order of operations? Like, in the grimoire you do this, that, the other, and at what point?
I think preparing the circle, for instance. There's circumambulations in Pyramidos, which I combine with sprinkling holy water around the circle and so on. So I do a certain amount of splicing of the GV process of preparing the circle in advance and then getting in it and making another preparatory stage. And Pyramidos actually takes care of a fair bit of that. And then there's the confession in Pyramidos, which I think is an important part of Goetia.
Is that the 22?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you go through all of that then when you do this?
Oh yeah. We have prostrate on the floor. Yeah.
What were you saying about the confession part of Goetia?
Well, the confession is an important aspect. I mean, there's the 7 penitential psalms are much used, and they're recommended in the GV. So if you're going to drop that because you're not a Christian, it's got to be substituted.
Right.
Effectively. And saying, oh, well, confession is purely Christian is wrong, because you go back to the Orphic movement. They had their own version of original sin and self-purification and all the rest of it. And that's part of Goethe's lineage.
Mm-hmm.
And realizing that you're infinitely small in an infinitely vast universe, before you jump up and start saying, I am the master of the universe and all that stuff. It's useful. I mean, Crowley goes into this in quite a big way. He's got the various stages of ritual as chapters in magic and theory and practice. And the oath and confession form a combined chapter. So, Mr. Hedonist himself wasn't, he wasn't cutting confessions out of the process.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating. So did you find when you were doing your research for Geosophia and the what do you call it, the encyclopedia,
The Encyclopedia Goetica, yeah.
Goetica, yes. When you were doing your research into that, did you find evidence for confessionals going back into the pagan and
Oh yeah, big time. Big time. It's a major part of the Orphic cultus. And the Orphic books precede the papyri, precede the grimoires. I mean, that is a linear descent. So it would be absurd to say that the confession, etc., is purely Christian. It was there. Mm-hmm. It was there before.
Mm.
So and having a Thelemic version is fine by me. I mean, there's no reason why you shouldn't write your own.
Yeah, understanding kind of where Crowley was coming from with the there is no God but man. It certainly makes the Pyramidos confession more palatable than a lot of Christian stuff, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the Pyramidos structure is just perfect. I mean, another thing you need fairly regularly in the grimoire environment and other grimoires is stuff that's had a mass said over it. And that gets a bit awkward if you're chucking Christianity out. Mm-hmm. But in Pyramidos, there's a magical mass derived from the GD Eucharist of the elements.
Right.
So again, you've got to leave a stone on the altar. I mean, well, a mass is said. Well, great. Every time I do Pyramidos, I'm saying a mass.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes care of business in a lot of ways. I mean, I don't use pentagrams and so on, but about 50% of Crowley's ritual corpus is actually much more Greco-Egyptian friendly,
right,
and less 19th century Masonic. So and that's the part that I use.
Right. Yeah, me too. Actually, I find that a lot more interesting. The whole pentagrams and hexagram thing, in my opinion, is and this is not anybody else's opinion, but just mine. I really think it's just there for exercising those psychic muscles. Being able to visualize the blue lights and the above and the below, and being able to accomplish the imagination and the imaginative aspects. I think that the point of most of that is just it's like doing squats.
Yeah. Pyramidos does its purifications and banishings and things another way. There's no pentagrams and so on involved. It's much more consistent with the old papyri and grimoire format. I mean, I find it a fairly seamless join.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's invocations from the Crowley corpus, like Israfel and so on, which he intended as a model. Some people go and compose their own Egyptian-style invocations.
Yeah.
That fits into Pyramidos so well. It was undoubtedly written for it.
I would agree.
There's references in the text of both rituals, which are entirely complementary.
Right. Yeah, I think that they work really well together too. That's one of the things that we've started doing when we my partner and I do the whole Trithemian system of invocation, and instead of doing a statement of intent, we'll substitute Orphic hymns, or we've done Pyramidos, and what's the one that we did for Saturn? The Conjuration of Kronos. That's what it was. Yeah, from what's his name? But and when you conjure yeah, that's him. That guy. Yeah, and when you do that as your statement of intent and just sort of like immerse yourself in the forces, it's very interesting. It's a lot easier. But yeah, Israfel is great for conjuring the forces of Mercury, in my opinion.
Oh yeah.
So, years and years ago, I ran into you on, I think it was Solomonic was the first place that we started talking on Yahoo groups.
Yeah, I think it was.
And you were at the time, I think, sort of the beginning of the wave of the occult revival, the modern occult revival. And
The third wave, yeah.
yeah, I think you actually coined the term. You were the first person I ever met that started talking about it in terms of, that we're actually going through another expansion of the Western occult. Like we're taking another step forwards towards becoming adults.
Yeah, adult's a good way of putting it.
So when you started out versus where it's at now, how would you I don't know, classify or rate your opinion of where we're at with the occult revival? How far have we come so far?
Got over ourselves a fair bit. We're not sort of poo-pooing the ancients and the medievals and so on, saying, oh no, all that stuff's old hat. Quite as much as we used to. Which I'm very happy with, because I've never been content with that mindset. Assuming moderns know better.
Right, just because we're modern.
Yeah, the myth of progress thing. Some of the stuff we don't understand, we might understand better just by doing it for a while rather than sniffing at it. Yeah.
Reading about it.
That's always been my basic assumption. Well, it'll get clearer if you try doing it.
Seems to have worked out for you. So, all right. So beyond that, so like we had the conversation over the last couple of weeks about the mythical grimoire traditionalist who doesn't apparently end up existing in real life. the
Very hard, really, because you have to do a certain amount of interpretation and reconstruction just to get the stuff off the ground. And if you don't even know you're doing that, you're probably not thinking it through properly.
But I think I guess in I want to say like 2005, 2004, there was this I don't know, the Liszewski current, the people who wanted to say that everything had to be done literally by the book and that they were doing it by the book and everybody else was doing it wrong. Do you remember that phase?
I do remember it, and I remember that it was full of massive contradictions, like he was using GD correspondences to explain the measurements of the circle and all sorts of other fairly modern stuff. And also splicing bits together, like, oh yeah, Levi's interpretation of the basting rod, you ought to insert that, but there's no trace of that in the grimoires. So again, even more so, he wasn't doing it by the book.
He was just pretending.
Yeah. Some of his heptameron stuff's very solid, and I don't reject everything Liszewski says. I think he probably had reasons for approaching it the way he did and was trying to nudge things along. But yeah, it is difficult stuff, and the contradictions are fairly apparent.
Yeah. I think it was pretty cool, though, actually, that we got from there to here. I guess last week we had that big kerfuffle with the post that Brabus wrote. And it really feels like the entire culture of I don't know, the grimoire tradition or whatever you want to call it has shifted, and we've moved on to something newer and better.
I think so. I mean, there are many angles on it. I mean, you've got Stephen Skinner defining exactly what the Solomonic method is, but distinguishing it from folk magic. Well, yeah, they did kind of run in parallel rather a lot, so a more folky angle isn't necessarily a bad thing. So you've got these various flavours of grimoire magic, and they're all informing each other. But, yeah, and occasionally arguing with each other, but it is moving on at the same time.
Do you think that I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, we've got the papyri now. The Golden Dawn had a tiny, tiny, tiny fragment of them, and we've got so much more now.
Right.
These resources are all around us, and if you've got, or you're prepared to spend a reasonable amount of money, then they're accessible
Mm-hmm.
and should speed things up.
Do you think the next generation of authors is going to, I mean, like, basically it went from Liszewski and I can't remember his name, like, I can't remember who else it was, but there was like Liszewski publishing stuff in the very, this is authentic even though it wasn't. And then there was Poke Runyon who published some stuff about stuff. But then all of a sudden there were you and Joseph Peterson made a lot of the grimoire texts available, and Aaron Leach made a lot of things more accessible to a lot of people. There was a sudden kind of explosion, I guess, in people that were focused back on the grimoires as a tradition that was valuable and useful. So I can think of 3 or 4 authors, over the last few years that have started to get on the bandwagon, as it were, or at least pick up the reins of the current and sort of start moving it forward. But my question is, do you think that the current set of occult grimoire authors, do you think that there are enough people interested in it now that it will continue versus fizzling out like it did previously when grimoire started gaining the interest of some people?
Well, I think it should do. It's certainly more meaty than when we had, like Idris Shah and A.E. Wade and Maiders Keir Solomon and not a lot else.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've got a whole bunch of material, including Skinner's thesis on Solomonic magic and so on. And we can compare all these and thrash things out and think, oh, these are the stages that the ritual's meant to be in. Some of which I still don't think is terribly well understood. As aspects of ritual mechanics, I think we need to explore another way.
Right, I agree 100%. Actually, that was one of my questions I had about the Thelemic stuff when you were talking about understanding how to put a ritual together in quote-unquote high magic or whatever using Thelemic formulas. A lot of the grimoire stuff, I don't know if we understand that I don't think we understand currently what the formula of a lot of the grimoire approaches were. There's a lot of people saying this is the opening, this is a license to depart, and blah blah blah, and they kind of try to categorize all these different grimoires under those headings, but I don't think that there's as much evidence to really support that there is a formula to the grimoire tradition that is consistent across like everything that's attributed to Solomon, for example.
I'm inclined to agree. I mean, the Dr. Rudd thesis, you've got so many Latin terms that describe the process exactly. Yeah, I think that describes the post-grimoire Rosicrucian analysis fairly well, but it doesn't necessarily describe the way the grimoire authors were thinking.
Right, it's that Renaissance.
And so on, part of the Rosicrucian thing that came after the grimoires and got interested in them. It's a different set of people entirely.
Right. And all right, so one of the things I really liked about True Grimoire was that you went through it and you analyzed it by itself. You didn't. You were informed by your experiences and your researches in other areas, but you didn't let that influence how you interpreted the grimoire so much. I thought that was really cool. That was one of the first expositions of one of the medieval works that I ever saw that was as thorough and complete as what you did. That wasn't overly colonial.
Yeah, good word.
But yeah, I think that so I really believe that focus that you brought to that, and then when you started Geosophia and Geosophia 2, that eclectic observation and recording of the theme of Goetia through Greece and ancient paganism and the different cultures that you explored it, with the Sibyls and understanding the role of the dead. I think you've kind of been a very key figure, of course. I think everybody would agree that you're pretty key in cracking open the appreciation of what we're trying to do here as a living tradition. You've included the dead. You've included the personal journey of a person, in their own approach to whatever, the great work or whatever you want to call it. But also how it's community focused. I think you were one of the first people to start doing that. But I've noticed, like on things like the Solomonic Facebook group, that there are a lot of other people who've kind of started picking that up and putting it into practice. Do you see a lot of the this revival becoming a living tradition yet, or is it still in its infancy?
No, I think the signs are good. We've not acknowledged that, okay, we don't have a living oral folk tradition, but we do have a continuous literary tradition that we can get a better grasp of with modern academic techniques and access to more of the texts. So, the potential is very good, I think, for becoming more of a bit of both, an oral folk tradition and a continuous, better understood literary tradition.
Yeah.
I don't want to be complacent about it, which is why I still occasionally get defensive about my traditions. Like, hands off, you don't understand.
No. Don't pollute the stream. It's good. It's good. Right.
But which is it's a personal response, but as long as it's still useful, I'm not going to apologise for it over much.
No, I don't think you owe anybody an apology for how things are going. I think it's working pretty well. So where do you see it going next? I mean, if we've got people talking about it, we've got the seeds for an oral tradition, we've got people publishing, and publishers are a lot more interested in publishing real, authentic, the experiences of modern magicians who are recreating on their own or to the best of their ability the grimoire traditions. There's a lot more opportunities for people to get published and to create the literary tradition. And we've got the conversations on all the Facebook groups that I guess are a modern equivalent to an oral tradition. So what do you think happens next? What do you see the future of our tradition turning into?
It's hard to say because we're not in a position socially to regulate ourselves in any way or even stratify things in a helpful way. So it's a bit of a free-for-all. But but at the same time, there's solid information there for people that want to use it. Mm-hmm. Where I'd like things to go,
right,
is more spirit cults. Really, right? People are like, we're working with the spirit. Not necessarily one that's already famous and talked about on the internet every day. Maybe some of the less well-known ones that just have fallen through the cracks up till now, when we've got better sources now that mention spirits that weren't in the Goetia. Mm-hmm. And there's some spirits in the Goetia we still know very little about. So active cults where they're cultivating the spirit and being less critical of so-called unverified personal gnosis, because hey, sometimes it's right.
And when it's
the guy might not have the academic background to know that his stuff's right, but some of us should have.
Right, and when it's goofy bullshit, everybody knows it's goofy bullshit.
Yeah, right. Except when after the guy's written his weird and wonderful book, evidence starts turning up that maybe he's not a total goofball. Maybe it was a real vision. Mm-hmm. That does happen. So spirit cults is something I'd like to see us being brave enough to admit we're doing. I'm nurturing the spirit and listening to them. Maybe have some sort of rational academic stuff going on the side to help you, not go too crazy, but still have the guts to do it and admit that's what you're doing. I'm interested in this spirit, so I'm conjuring them a lot.
Right.
And having conversations with them, and they're telling me stuff, but be a bit less critical of the unverified personal notice, and more prepared to look at it and say, hey, this guy could be on something. Have room for that.
There's a lot of danger in that, actually.
It is dangerous. So we should have said that first, shouldn't we?
Right. Well, everything we do is dangerous, yes, of course.
Made it more accessible, and yeah, to a certain extent, yeah, that's an amoral thing to do. It's like, yeah, burn your own fingers at your own risk.
Right.
That should be understood, and not be an asshole to people too much. That should also be understood
Yeah.
while we're making this stuff accessible. But it is nonetheless dangerous. It does make you jump through hoops.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and getting back to Crowley again, there's no point to an ordeal that can't be failed.
Truth. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, uh, one of the things that happens, so I don't know about you, but personally, I work with about maybe half a dozen spirits other than the planetary stuff that I do regularly. But basically, maybe three spirits, maybe, I mean, if you count the four spirits on the backs of the Solomonic pinnacles or whatever, the pentagrams of the planetary spirits, I might have a dozen spirits that I work with regularly, and of those, maybe three or four talismans or something. So when you're talking about spirit cults, over the years, I found myself attracted to certain spirits, and I work with them a lot. Like Bune of Megatons Goetia is a good spirit that I like to work with a lot because of the eloquence, and I like to write, and I like to make money off my writing. So, he and I get along really well. Um, and I think over the years I've developed sort of what you're talking about as a spirit cult with that entity. And he's told me things that are kind of weird that he wants to receive as gifts. And, we have this strange, it's definitely non-traditional. Like there's nothing in the grimoires that support anything that, some of the weirder things that I do with Bune, as a result of our relationship. Like Rivers, there's nothing about him in Rivers, but I get along really well with him at a fork in a river. There's always a really good place to make an offering to him or receive some insight if I need to, figure out what's going on. If I go to a confluence of some streams, it becomes a very useful medium for me to communicate with him, for example. So yeah, so this cult of the spirit thing, you're going to end up, one of the dangers that I was actually referring to earlier was that people in the community are going to think you're crazy when you start talking about some of the things that you experience with the spirits. So I guess my question is, have you developed a relationship with a spirit in particular that if you actually were to present some of your cult of that spirit experiences to the public, that they might react poorly to your personal gnosis, or is that different?
But yeah, that potential certainly exists. I seem to be getting away with it with some of my spirit pamphlets and so on. But yeah, there are things we don't understand in the background of some of these spirits. So some of it's just gaps, and then there's why this connection, why that connection, and we're only going to find out by getting involved with them. But one thing that turns up with St. Cyprian with me is sailing ships. And that crops up in some of the Spanish texts as well. But there's no sign of it in the original Christian polemic against Cyprian and so on. There's no ships mentioned. There's no clues why ships became associated with him in the Spanish environment. Yeah. But it seems to be a very big thing in my relationship with him. It's like, okay, I don't know why the sailing ships are there, but going to have to go with it. This is a sailing ship image is an acceptable gift to my Cyprian, whether it works for someone else's Cyprian or not. And that kind of flexibility we do have to have space for, I think, as well as maintaining rigor and being aware of what is traditional. The record is incomplete. Sometimes come through and we'll find hints that it's legitimate at best.
Yeah.
The danger is we'll just go off the rails, and the devil will tell them that they've got all sorts of terrible things to do, and they'll say, well, this must be right. Jake Stratton Kent said so.
Right. Yeah, it's all your fault, basically. But yeah, I think I don't know. I think when you put it the way you kind of put it earlier, it makes more sense because it's our experiences with the spirits are this, and use it to inform your own experiences with the spirits as that.
Some of them get just a few lines in a spirit catalogue,
Hmm.
but there is a great deal more to them as entities, nonetheless. I mean, the guy who wrote the grimoire is supposedly interested in what he can get from them and nothing else. But
Hmm.
that's not very satisfying to me.
Right, and I don't think that's even true. I think it was just kind of a footnote, like, oh, by the way, these are the main points, and I think the grimoires are a suggestion text, sort of this is the general thing, and then you develop that personal relationship with the spirit where you learn more about it and what it all means. One of the things I like about Brother Moloch is that he has developed a personal relationship with his spirits to the point where, he's gotten to know them, and it's more than the 3 lines in the text, and you understand that the details get filled in differently for each magician that conjure them because we all have our own. It's just like every friendship, you're not the same Jake Stratton Ken to everybody, or to me.
Exactly. I mean, I've said very similar things myself. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We see different aspects of the spirit because we're different.
Hmm.
Some people find Skirling quite chatty and jokey. I personally find him very formal and a bit dry. But that's the nature of our relationship.
Right, and exactly, like you'll react differently to other people than I do, right? So yeah, I think so. Just to kind of, I don't know, put a cap on it or draw it all together. So what you're saying you'd like to see more of in the future is more records of people's personal experiences with the spirits and where you end up as a result of
Yeah,
that, without it being an authoritative and dogmatic. This is what you must experience with the spirits, otherwise it's not true.
I think we ought to have space for that. Yeah, because otherwise, there's not going to be something coming up from the grassroots. It's all going to be old hands dictating how it is, and that historically hasn't worked very well.
Right.
Uh, Generally speaking, traditions, especially in new waves of traditions, it does come up from the grassroots to a large extent. Lots and lots of experimental work done by different people, and some of it falls by the wayside, and other stuff gets continued because other people say, "Oh, I'd like to look at that and try it." And eventually, a new synthesis kind of evolves on a mass level. There might be a few great teachers or so on around who help it along a bit, but it is that massive experimentation and trial and error.
Hmm.
Yeah, and comparing notes. Yeah, oh yeah, your god so and so is very like our god so and so. Maybe we should do a ritual that combines elements of both.
Hmm.
Doing that on a huge level, which they were in the ancient world, is how the great syntheses come about. So if
Right.
we've got no room for what we think of as underinformed people experimenting, then it's just not going to happen. It'll remain a borderline thing with no new events, no new myths, no retelling of the old myths that actually catches light and does what it's meant to. It'll just be a few ghosts in the machine rattling around still.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I personally feel pretty good about where we're at. I'm really happy that I got to be part of this particular phase of history with the whole
Oh yeah,
occult
it's a great
tradition.
time to be a grimoirist.
Yeah. Not that I'm a grimoirist. I have one grimoire I use. I picked the
I,
easy
I
one.
use I consult a great many grimoires. The true grimoire, I very rarely need to step outside it. It expands to accommodate whatever new directions I go in.
Right. And I
Well,
found
the
that
same
I found the same with
aspect,
Emius.
Spirit Catalogue, the Goetia Spirit Catalogue and others that really intrigue me.
Hmm.
And I will undoubtedly go there, but with a true grimoire background or some tweak of my true grimoire background to accommodate it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, once you have a system that works, what more do you need?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh, you're not still using the true grimoire? Well, yeah.
Right. I have all the tools I need, thanks.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I look at lots of other things. I'm very interested in, lots of phases of occult history, and there's a grimoire genre as a whole, which is a huge genre. I mean, it's sort of, 10th century up till 19th century, so it's got lots and lots of diversity and aspects to it. And part of what I've been doing in my writings isn't saying this is what it is and what it should be. It's saying, look, this is what has happened, so various other directions are are legitimate. They have precedent. It's not a narrow focus thing. Magic could be this rather than that, and still be within its original remit.
Right, exactly. It's lots of different experiences all qualify. As long as you're actually, working with the spirits to enjoy life, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And they do occasionally throw me a curveball where I have very far from a good time, but after results, I'm usually a more complete person and ready for more joy, as it were.
Right.
Yeah, literally more. I've become more open, more liberated, more able to receive the good things through having gone through a few magical ordeals along the way. And this, these so-called evil spirits, sometimes, the word Satan means tester. That's exactly what they do.
Mm-hmm.
Your relationship with such and such a spirit might, involve imbalance, but that might be necessary. Swing the other way so far, you realise that, oh, well, actually I was kind of extreme in the other direction before. Now I know where the middle is.
So you do see this as a spiritual transformation process.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
totally.
So
Goetia is a path.
You leave that out of most of your texts on these things. I don't know if you do it on purpose or if maybe it's just I didn't notice it while I was reading your texts, but it seems like...
It's more a matter of you didn't notice it.
Probably didn't.
No, it's definitely a path. The underworld initiation has degenerated into treasure hunting.
Yeah. Yes. But the underground initiation, the underworld initiation, is still the same thing that got copied in the celestial stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, celestial is also almost a meaningless word. I mean, we got more interested in the planets after thousands upon thousands of years of considering the stars part of the underworld.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The sun. We're only interested in the sun to a certain extent when he goes through the underworld. You look at the Ra stuff. The really big deal is that the nighttime sun. Same with Sumeria,
Mm-hmm.
Shamash or Utu as he was earlier. The thing he's really honoured for is his system of laws, which he delivers when he's in the underworld.
Hmm.
This whole idea that the celestial sphere is opposed. No, they're kind of, the chthonic and the stellar are so close as to be indistinguishable, and we only get interested in the planets. In the historical period, first the Chaldeans and then the Greeks who were talking to the Chaldeans. Isn't that so? That's all in the historic period, not the prehistoric period, which is infinitely longer.
Mm-hmm.
So look at most of the major constellations, or a great many of them, are named after underworld deities. There's, including in Jewish law, Shem Hazai or so on. He might be in hell according to somebody, but he's also the constellation Orion.
Hmm.
But it's the night sky, so nocturnal, chthonic, and so on. They're very vague umbrella terms in a lot of ways. For something
right. Because you can't even see the planets until the sun has gone down.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Exactly. I mean, the sun's not important to people who got rather too much of it. Anyway, sun gods are kind of, often kind of marginal figures. Helios was never big in Greece until, the Hellenistic period, when they started talking to the Egyptians and the Syrians and everybody else who had a major sun god cult. And there's not that many solar lower and so on in voodoo and similar traditions. Well, it's not something that's emphasized a great deal. The idea that we should have a lunar goddess and a sun god and then we'll understand everything. It's not a very perfect key.
Right. Well, when you look at, digging in the dirt underground and refining the ore into the actual metals that make up the metals that are associated with the planets, gold is not something you run into very often. So it kind of makes sense when you look at the underworld as the initiatory structure.
Yeah, totally. I mean, most of the old initiations, after the initiation, he no longer feared death. Well, why do you think that was? Because he'd been to the underworld and already seen it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think my favorite god I've worked with so far has been Hermes Chthonios, the terrestrial Hermes. He's definitely a lot of fun.
And he's the original Hermes. I mean, it's like the general purpose messenger is a much later development.
Right.
Hermes Chthonios is undoubtedly the core of that god.
But would you agree with me that it's the prototype for the Agathos daemon and the Holy Guardian Angel?
Along similar lines. I mean, angel means messenger.
Right. But I think the whole prototype was laid out there, when he was the guardian and the guide when you're traveling through the underworld. Mean, all the stuff that was attributed to the Holy Guardian Angel under Crowley and subsequent generations, that was all Hermes. That was all Herm,
Mm-hmm.
but not Hermes. It was the Herm of the Crossroads. I don't know.
A much more primitive conception that hasn't been doled up by the philosophers, but does actually work on a mythological level and on a gut level.
Yeah.
I find the mythological approach to spirits by far the most useful and informative, considering them as unpaid shopkeepers whose stores you go and turn over. It's not very philosophically satisfying. Whereas a mythological drama that they're all participants in, and so is the magician, that makes a lot more sense. It's a lot more three-dimensional.
Mm-hmm.
So, the spiritual aspect is certainly there. I mean, performing goetic rituals on a regular basis, especially, Pyramidos is actually a ritual of initiation, by the way.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the neophyte for the individual, so.
And the eschatological context is there automatically. I mean, you're dealing with demons, for God's sake. Spirits of the underworld and so on. Yeah. Afterlife, underworld, same thing. So initiations and coming to terms with death and life, obviously. Real life, people's real problems and so on, which is what some of the more tinker about bits of magic are for, is helping other people as well as yourself to survive.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still an ethic there. I'm doing this for my community. This is my role.
Yeah.
Pastoral magician sort of thing.
You're very tribal.
Yeah.
When you get into it.
Yeah. And very initiatory. The more you perform goetic ritual, the more you get the crap burnt off your soul or whatever.
Right.
The less of it you're carrying around.
Yeah.
And a certain amount of humility comes with it.
Yeah, because you realize that you're actually pretty crappy most of your life, and then you only got better towards the end.
Yeah, I'm cognizant of my mistakes.
Right. Yeah, it's only been in the last 5 years that I actually was proud of myself, and I recognize that in the next 5 years I will not be proud of how I've been for the last 5. So, yeah. All right, man. Well, thank you very much for your time. I'm going to go ahead and call it here because we've been talking for about an hour or so.
That's cool. It's been good talking to you. I hope it's not been too much gibberish.
Oh, not at all. It was great stuff. I would be able to keep talking to you for hours if, time permitted and I didn't have other things I needed to move on towards. But definitely thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. I think I really appreciate everything you've done for our community and this current, and I hope it keeps growing and moving towards your ideals and your goals and what you see for it.
Great talking to you, and I hope it does.